Welcome back to the dawn of Christianity, a deep dive into the first century and the early papacy. In our first episode, we explored the political stage of the Greek and Roman empires, a world of Hellenistic kingdoms and Roman might that set the scene for Christianity's emergence. Today, we're exploring the cultural milieu of the first century, the ideas, beliefs, and ways of life that shaped the world into which Christianity was born. It's a vibrant confluence of Greek philosophy, Roman rituals, Jewish faith, and the buzzing energy of cultural exchange. So, let's step into this world like travelers wandering through a bustling ancient marketplace. First, let's talk about the Greek cultural heritage that was still alive and kicking in the first century. After Alexander the Great's conquests, Greek ideas didn't just fade away, they spread like wildfire across the Mediterranean. This was the Hellenistic world, where philosophy wasn't just for erudite scholars, but a way of life. Take Platonism, for example. Plato's ideas about a higher, perfect reality influenced how people thought about the soul and the divine. Then there were the Stoics, who preached self-control and living in harmony with nature, ideas that resonated with anyone trying to navigate a chaotic world. Epicureans, on the other hand, argued that pleasure in moderation was the key to a good life. These philosophies weren't abstract debates. They shaped how people saw right and wrong, life and death. And then there was the language, Koine Greek, the common tongue of the Eastern Mediterranean. It was the language of markets, letters, and ideas, letting people from Alexandria to Athens share stories, poems, and beliefs. Greek literature, from Homer's epics to the sharp wit of playwrights, filled the air with tales of gods and heroes, while mystery cults promised secret knowledge and spiritual connection. This was a world hungry for meaning, open to new ideas about the divine. Now let's shift to Rome, which didn't just conquer lands, it absorbed cultures like a sponge. By the first century, Rome had woven Greek ideas into its own way of life, creating a cultural synthesis that was uniquely Roman. Religion was at the heart of it. The Romans had their gods, Jupiter, Mars, Venus, but they happily adopted Greek deities, giving them new names and stories. More striking was emperor worship, where the emperor was seen as a living god, especially in the provinces. Temples to Augustus popped up everywhere, and offering sacrifices to the emperor's divine spirit was a public duty. This wasn't just religion, it was politics, a way to glue the empire together. Now, Roman society was sharply divided. Patricians at the top, plebeians in the middle, and slaves at the bottom. Yet everyone was bound by patronage, a system where the powerful helped the less powerful in exchange for loyalty. Cities were the heartbeat of Roman culture. Think forums buzzing with debates, bathhouses filled with gossip, and theatres staging grand spectacles. Festivals, chariot races, and gladiator games kept the masses entertained, while the elite debated philosophy over wine. This was a world of grandeur, but also of tension, as Rome tried to balance its traditions with the cultures it absorbed. So, into this mix steps Jewish culture, which stood out like a beacon in the Greco-Roman world. The Jews of the first century were part of a vast diaspora, scattered across cities like Alexandria, Antioch, and Rome itself. They carried their faith with them, centered on the Torah and the synagogue. The Septuagint, a Greek translation of the Hebrew Bible, was a bridge between Jewish tradition and the Hellenistic world, letting Jews read their sacred texts in the language of the day. Figures like Philo of Alexandria blended Jewish theology with Greek philosophy, arguing that the Jewish God and Plato's ideas weren't so far apart. Synagogues weren't just places of worship, they were community hubs where Jews gathered to pray, study, and debate. But Jewish monotheism clashed with the polytheism around them. While Greeks and Romans juggled multiple gods, Jews insisted on one God, and that made them stand out, sometimes admired, sometimes mistrusted. In cities like Alexandria, tensions flared into riots between Jews and their neighbours, fueled by cultural differences and Roman policies that often played groups against each other. This brings us to the magic of the first century: cultural exchange. The Roman Empire was a crossroads, with trade routes and ports linking east and west. Ideas travelled as fast as goods. Philosophers, merchants, and travellers carried stories and beliefs from one city to the next. Cities like Antioch and Ephesus were melting pots where Greek, Roman, Jewish, and other traditions mingled. This wasn't always peaceful. Romans could be tolerant of foreign religions, but only if they didn't threaten the state. Judaism was often granted special exemptions, like not having to worship the emperor, but that tolerance had limits. Christianity, emerging from Jewish roots, faced even tougher scrutiny. Why? Because it was new, and it didn't fit neatly into the empire's religious categories. Yet this cultural mixing was a gift to early Christians. Greek philosophy, especially the idea of the logos, a divine reason or word, shaped how early Christian thinkers explained Jesus. The Apostle John would later call Jesus the Logos, a concept that would have made sense to a Greek audience. Meanwhile, the Jewish emphasis on one God and a covenant community gave Christianity its moral backbone. But let's not romanticize this. The first century was a place of conflict as much as connection. Romans sometimes cracked down on foreign religions, especially if they seemed rebellious. Jews faced expulsions from Rome under emperors like Claudius, and Christians, seen as a Jewish sect at first, got caught in the crossfire. Persecution wasn't constant, but it was a shadow looming over early believers. Still, the cultural richness of the time, Greek philosophy, Roman organization, Jewish faith, created fertile ground for Christianity to grow. Koine Greek let missionaries like Paul write letters that could be read from Corinth to Rome. Roman roads and ships carried those letters, and the empire's urban centres gave Christians places to gather, debate, and worship. As we wrap up, let's take a moment to soak in this rich cultural mosaic. The first century was a world of big ideas and big attentions. Greek philosophy asked deep questions about life and the divine. Roman culture offered stability, but demanded loyalty, sometimes at a steep cost. Jewish communities held fast to their faith, even as they navigated a world that didn't always understand them. Into this mix came Christianity, a faith that borrowed from all these traditions, yet offered something new, a message of hope and salvation that spoke to slaves and senators alike. This cultural world wasn't just a backdrop. It shaped how Christianity spread, how its leaders thought, and how its followers lived. In our next episode, we'll zoom in on the political events of the Roman Empire in the first century, the emperors, wars, and upheavals that tested early Christians and shaped their path. From the Pax Romana to Nero's persecutions, we'll see how politics and faith collided. Until then, picture yourself in a Roman forum, surrounded by the hum of voices, the clash of ideas, and the promise of something new just over the horizon.